So Biden has said he is not going to be forgiving $50,000 in student loans, something that many top Democrats have been pushing, including Elizabeth Warren, says right here. So yesterday, Joe Biden did a CNN town hall, and he was asked this question of whether or not he would be willing to forgive $50,000 of student debt via executive order. And Joe Biden said, no, he's not going to do it. Here's the article from CNN recapping that question. He says right here, President Joe Biden made it clear during Tuesday night CNN town hall that he disagrees with other members of his party who want to cancel $50,000 of student debt per borrower. Quote, I will not make that happen, Biden said, after a member of the audience said his proposal to cancel $10,000 per borrower doesn't go far enough. But top Democratic congressional leaders, including Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, are calling on Biden to cancel $50,000 per borrower. Dozens of Democrats reintroduced a bicameral resolution earlier this month, urging Biden to take action, arguing that he has the executive power to do so. Biden argues that the government shouldn't forgive debt for people who went to Harvard and Yale and Penn. And he's also indicated that he believes Congress should make changes through legislation, which would make them harder to undo. Okay, let me try to make this case for you, because I know a lot of people, whenever the cancel student debt comes up, I see a lot of this on social media where a lot of people say, why should I have to pay off your loans? What's it to me? You took them out. I didn't agree. I didn't sign off on these loans. Why do I have to pay off your student debt? Some people are saying, this is outrageous. It shouldn't be done by executive order. It needs to be done through Congress. Others are saying it just shouldn't be done at all. It is not my fault you took out these loans. So first of all, let's start off with this shouldn't be done with executive order. This should be done with Congress. The problem is Congress is totally ineffective. They are the worst branch of government. They don't get anything done. And at this point, that should be clear to all of us. They have the lowest approval rating and for anything. I think that people approve of Kim Jong-un more than they approve of the U.S. Congress. It's terrible. They can't get anything done. So Congress is not actually an effective working branch of government. They need reform. We need to seriously reform Congress. The only branches of government that seem to get anything done, and if you look at anything major or anything historic or anything that's actually worth mentioning, it was either done through executive order or it was done through SCOTUS. So either the Supreme Court rules on it or executive order is created. But that's really the only way we've been able to make any effective change in this country, unfortunately. And that is just because Congress is a blob of useless nothing. They need to be reformed. So I can understand why a president would get into office these days and say, crap, I'm just going to have to sign a bunch of executive orders if I'd want something in order to halt the deadlock, the gridlock that's in Congress, and then let the judges decide if what I've done is constitutional. That's sort of been the play from the beginning now. Now let's move. So that's why I would say the argument for why we're getting so many executive orders. I don't agree with executive orders to be used to the level and the amount that they've been used throughout the last several presidencies. But it is what it is because we have such a crap Congress. Now, the question of why should you even be forced with your taxpayer dollars to pay off student debt? Why should you have to pay for it when somebody else took out that loan? First of all, you're not going to feel it as a taxpayer. You don't feel anything that the government does when they're spending billions upon billions of dollars on the military or they bail out the banks. You're not actually feeling it. So just the argument, just for argument's sake, just to say to your neighbor, no, I don't want the government to give you some money. I mean, what kind of a person are you really? Think about that. It'd be like me saying, I don't want you to win the lottery. I don't want you to end up having a windfall of money. I don't want you to get a bonus from your employer. I don't want you to have whatever it might be. I mean, it's just, for one, it's just, you're being a crappy human by saying to somebody else, I don't want you to have some money, even though it's going to have absolutely zero effect on me. I still think you shouldn't get it, just out of the principle of the matter. I mean, come on, let's get real. Secondly, even if you could make the argument that you yourself will feel it, which you won't feel it. Let's get real. You will not feel it. You won't notice it. If my student loans, for one, you don't even know how many student loans I have or what the amount is. And if my student loans were forgiven tomorrow, what would it be to you? How would it change your life? Would you suddenly not be able to afford one more fast food meal a month? Or would you suddenly not be able to go to a movie that month? Or would you suddenly not be able to afford whatever it is you wanted just because the government happened to bail me out rather than a bank? You're literally not going to feel it. Secondly, the bottom line is this. Do we want to be a competitive nation on the world stage against the rising powers such as China and there's South Korea, Japan, Germany. There's all of these rising nations. Do we want to be competitive with them or do we not? Because in order to have a first world country that is innovative, that has high levels of education, with a population that's able to do things like engineer and innovate and create technology and medicines and we've got so much new tech and new things that are needed. If we want to live in a first world society where we have these nice things and we don't have to rely on countries like China to give us their technology because we have a stupid population, we are going to have to invest in our population. We need to invest in the American people. This should be a matter of national security, guys. This is not just oh, well, you're a spoiled brat and you don't need college. I'm fine. I didn't go to college. You don't need to go to college. That's fine. You didn't go to college if that's the choice you decided to make. But others did decide to go to college, and thank God they did, because they're now your doctor. They're now the person engineering the roads. They're the architects building the buildings. They're the technology engineers who are designing various different new tech that's out there. We need these people. And if we shun them and say, well, it's your choice for you decided to go to college, that's not my choice, that shouldn't be on me. Imagine if that idea actually seeped into the American psyche. Imagine if everybody agreed with you on that. So just imagine that world for 2 seconds. If everybody agreed, you're right, I don't need college, it's a waste of money, and I don't want to have to take out those loans. I don't want to have to be responsible for those loans. So you're right, I'm not going to go to college. If suddenly everybody in America did that, which, by the way, is something that a lot of the world powers that are rising would love. They would love it if suddenly we took ourselves out of the competition because we just made ourselves stupid. We wouldn't have any of these nice things to keep us a first world country. We would have to rely on foreign countries to import that technology in. We would no longer be the world provider of a lot of the major tech. Even as it is right now, we're not number one anymore. The United States on the world stage when it comes to innovation and technology is ranked about 5th or 6th. We're being beat out, actually, surprisingly, by the Scandinavian countries. People don't think of them as doing much over there. They're kind of up in the cold, and they don't get a lot of sunlight in the winter, and people don't really think much about them because they're not mugging people all around the world with their military. But because they invest in their populations, they have the highest educated populations. And now, according to various data, most of the innovation is starting to come from places like Norway, Denmark, the Netherlands, Sweden. They're actually starting to defeat the world when it comes to having an advanced technological society. Next to them, you've got a lot of the other countries in Asia. South Korea, China's rising, Japan, Taiwan, Singapore, they're all rising and rapidly. So if the United States takes this attitude of, screw you, it's your choice to get an education, I don't have to pay for it, and so, you just shouldn't have done it. That was your mistake. That's the attitude that conveys, that it was a mistake to do. Then you will be effectively discouraging this education from happening, and we will revert back to a society that needs to, will be like a Flintstone society if we keep that up before too long. We will not be able to afford the technology of other countries because we won't be manufacturing anything of our own in order to make money, in order to buy it. We'll be pretty much just gluttonous American pigs slothing around, trying to consume, and ultimately being really unable to innovate anything on our own. I don't think we want to really become that society. So the fact is, if you want to be a smart society that's competitive, you have to invest in your citizens. Otherwise, and this is the irony of it all, right? Otherwise, if you are going to be, and this is a very Republican stance to say that, no, I don't want to have to pay for your education, you're on your own, we will have to import in people. We will have to bring in immigrants, and we will have to court them, and we will have to bring them in, and we'll have to say, look, from India, a lot of them will come from India, a lot of them will come from probably China, a lot of them will come from South Korea, Japan. We'll try to get these innovative minds anywhere we can get them. The Norwegians, by the way, the Danes, the Swedes, they're not coming because they have such a great society that they've got going on. They don't want to immigrate to the United States. This is why we're not seeing vast numbers of immigrants coming from Scandinavian nations. They've got it made. They don't need us. But we will see a lot of immigrants coming in from India, and they're going to be the ones dominating our society when it comes to tech and medicine, because we have a stupid population, because we discouraged our kids from going to college because we said it's too expensive. And if you go, you're going to be in massive debt and it's going to be your responsibility. No one's going to help you. I just can't stress enough how it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on this. It's a bad idea. If you agree that we have to be competitive, if you're on the right and you think we've got to be competitive with China and we don't want immigrants coming in stealing jobs, and you think that we need to be able to innovate and isolate and become America first, then you, of all people, should want a strong American population that is brilliant and able to innovate and create. It is a matter of national security. And if you're on the left, it's obvious, because most people on the left understand this. They understand that education is integral to an intelligent society, that it creates wealth, it creates jobs, it creates a better society overall, that if you are educated, then you have a chance at actually reaching the middle class. You have the chance of starting your own business and reaching the upper middle class, or even becoming wealthy. So education is extremely important. Remember back in the day when we weren't educating women past the 8th grade. There was no innovation there. What kind of a society were we living in at that point? We were not the great world power at that point. It was the UK, right? It was Britain. It was European nations. It wasn't the United States. We have been able to compete and grow and accelerate and become a world power because we have an educated society that could create and innovate technology. So I want to show you this also. This is a graph just so that you can understand the cost of college tuition, like what has happened, because a lot of people say, look at that, kids should just have to pay for it, because that's what, fine, college is fine, college is important, but people should have to pay for it. So here's this graph here. That red line is the tuition costs over the years since starting in 1972 is where that graph starts, going all the way to about 2011. So it's even worse now. But that red line is the cost of tuition, and that blue line is regular inflation. So see how the cost of tuition has exceeded regular inflation. I mean, look at that. That is unbelievable. So this is one of the reasons why it's not as easy as it was back in your parents' day and age to just work a summer job, save up, pay for college. That was possible maybe when my dad, who's a boomer, maybe when he was a kid, he was wanting to go to college. That was somewhat possible for him to do. It was still a lot of work. It was still very difficult. That's why most people still didn't go to college back then. Most people weren't innovating. Most people weren't going. They were doing blue collar jobs, which is important and necessary. And we absolutely need those jobs too. It takes every type to make the world go round. But that's the thing, is we should all understand that. If you decide not to go to college and you want to do a blue collar job, you are 100%. That is good. One thing that I hate, I think, about kind of the attitude on the left that I think sort of created this attitude on the right, was this sort of thumbing their nose at those who chose not to go to college and saying, well, you're just not intelligent, or you're not like me. I'm better than you because I have a college education. That is not a good, healthy attitude either, because it really does take everybody and all types to make the world go round. What good is having a car that some engineer, designed and gets paid millions of dollars to design? What good is that person if you get a car and you buy this wonderful piece of technology and then you have no one to fix it, right? I mean, we need everybody in order to make this society go round. That is for sure. But one of the problems with college education is that it has just skyrocketed in price. So kids that want to go to college nowadays absolutely could not work a summer job and pay for their college education working through the summer. It's not possible. Take on top of that, I want to show you this other chart. This is the how much rent has increased compared to actual, look at this, compared to wages. So not only is the college tuition gone sky high, but once you're in college, you have to figure out how you're going to pay your rent. And now look at this, because you have to support yourself through college. And now look at this, the rent has increased and the wages have not. In fact, the wages at one point, really after the crash, went down. So, and look at this, cost of household rent still has gone up. So you see that it's a compounding issue when it comes to these students. They're having to go off to college. Their tuition is outrageous now compared to inflation. On top of it, they have to support themselves with rent and food, and there's costs of all kinds of other things that are compiled into this. And all of that has skyrocketed as well. So what students are forced to do is they're forced to take out loans. And the loans of today are way larger because of the inflation of tuition and rents and just cost of living in general. Those loans are magnitudes higher than the loans of our previous generations. Those previous generations were able to maintain and manage their loans. Nowadays, younger people take out loans that are huge, and it really burdens them to the point where they cannot participate in society as much as you think they would be able to, because they are burdened with loans. Even with a high wage, even with high salaries from their top paying jobs, they're still living amongst those who did not go to college, and they're paying off their student loans. And they're stuck like that for a couple of decades. They're stuck like that. It is actually discouraging people from even going to college at all, because unless they love it, unless they really love the job that they're going to go do, there's no incentive. There's no monetary incentive now to become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. You're going to end up financially no different than someone who didn't go to college. So unless it's a real passion and you want to do it because of, the passion of it, there is no actual incentive. It used to be where you take out the loan, it would be worth it in the end because you get a big job. And then, yes, you're going to pay off this little bit of loan. You've got a little bit of debt, but nonetheless, it'll be worth it in the end because you're going to have a high paying job. It's not really like that so much anymore. Nowadays, lawyers come out of school and doctors come out of school with about $200,000 in debt. And then on top of that, the banks charge interest. So, which right then and there, that should be completely banned. That needs to be abolished right away, is the fact that these banks are able to make huge amounts of interest off of federally backed loans that if students default on them, the government, our tax dollars, will pay off. Those loans shouldn't have interest, or the interest should be extremely low. But instead, what these colleges do is, what these lenders do is they front load that interest. And so a $200,000 loan is now $280,000. And so students are having to pay back $80,000 in just interest off of trying to get an education to better our society. And it's not just about bettering their own future. I understand a lot of people say, no, it's about them. And it's just every man for themselves, right? That mentality, every man for themselves. And they're just getting this job to better themselves. They're bettering you too. They're bettering me. They're bettering our society. We need everybody in order to make this society work. And we certainly need them if we're going to have a competitive society against foreign countries. Cannot stress that enough. These other countries are thrilled that we are downplaying education, that we are making it nearly impossible for students to get. China, by the way, there's no student debt in China. They don't have that problem over there. Those students, they go to the top universities in China. It's just like the UK. Their top universities are public. Oxford, Cambridge, those are public universities in the UK. Meanwhile, here in the United States, our top universities like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, they're private. We have a bad system. So it's not just about forgiving student loans. I think that's a first step. And I do think it should be at least $50,000. Really what I'd like to see the government do, and I think would be fair enough, is look at the inflation of student loan debt and look at the interest and do a blanket forgiving and say, we're going to revert your debt down. We're not going to get rid of your debt, but we're going to revert it down to what would be a normal level had you gone to school in 1970. And we're going to go back to that level, obviously adjust for inflation, and then say that's the amount you're going to be expected to pay in today's society in 2021. So adjust it for inflation, but also retroactively take those loan debts down and say, look, these banks have been running off with all the money, why is that? Why have the banks been allowed to do this? Oh, simple answer, because Congress, remember, ineffective Congress that doesn't get anything done? Oh, that's right. The banking system actually buys off our politicians more than any other industry out there. It's the banks that bought off our politicians. So, of course, the banks are in with the politicians, and they're allowing all of this highway robbery of our youth, essentially, really bankrupting our youth, putting them into a slave mode to the banks just when they're just trying to start their lives. And it is corruption, it is crooked, and it needs to be resolved. Forgiving student loan debt is only one part of this equation. That'll be good for today, right? But what about the students that are in school now, right now, gaining all of this debt? That doesn't help them. We need to totally reform the system to make it to where college education is accessible to everyone if we want to live in a good society. It should be accessible to everybody. It should be free. In a lot of instances, like it is in many other countries. In Germany, it is free, even if you're not German and you go to a German university. If you're an American, you go to a German university, they will educate you for free because they believe education is a human right, and they believe that it is absolutely essential to having an innovative society, which, by the way, all the good stuff comes from Germany. Right? That's why they have the good cars, because they believe that they need an educated society in order to manufacture some of the best things. So there's a lot of countries in the world that understand this. We're still kind of slow to understanding that. And because we are so slow to understanding it, we are losing in the competition. We are losing in the competition. And we will no longer be the world's great power in 20 years. I can guarantee that. And if you are somebody with children, you are dooming them to that future, because you might be one of those people that is just holding the line saying, no, I shouldn't have to pay for your college education. You're on your own. Fine, fair enough. I don't think things necessarily need to be, I can compromise and say it doesn't have to be free, but it absolutely needs to be obtainable and something that doesn't hinder the formation of families, hinder the buying of homes, hinder the saving up for retirement. It cannot hinder those things. And right now, because of the amount of student loan debt that a person has when they're just graduating from college, which is only getting worse and worse and worse. Now, when I graduated college, when I graduated like 2005, so 15 years ago, the average student walked out of college with about $30,000 when I graduated from college. By the way, I've paid off those $30,000 over the last 15 years. I have paid in student loan debt about $30,000, what I've owed in student loan debt. And guess how much I still owe? I still owe $30,000. How is that possible? Oh, that's because the banks are allowed to front load the interest. You see the problem here? This isn't just about pay back what you took out. I took that out, yes, as a student, because I wanted to better my education, better myself, better my future, better my society, be a contributing member of society. But and they, well, read the fine print. Well, okay, so then what are you saying? I just shouldn't have gone to college? Because that's what that says. That's what you're saying when you say, well, then you just shouldn't have done it. Then I guess I shouldn't have gone to college. None of us should have, and we should just squander and live in a third world country because we're all a bunch of idiots. We have to import everything and anything. That's the way to make America great again. For sure, guys, that's a winning strategy. So I hope that I have convinced some of you tonight that this is a matter of national security. This is a matter of the U.S. just being competitive. This is a matter of living in a good society. And we talk about infrastructure, rebuilding infrastructure. We can't do that without engineers. We can't do that without educated people. So I hope that I have somewhat convinced you, when you just look at the price of education and inflation, that something absolutely radically needs to be done. And I think actually $10,000 per borrower, $50,000 per borrower just doesn't go far enough. We need full-on reform on top of drastically eliminating a lot of the student debt. Now, one last thing on this. I do want to say, I don't really think now's the time for this. I do think that this is something that's absolutely very important. I feel passionately about it. But at the same time, the majority of the people that are suffering right now because of the pandemic and the government shutdowns are people who didn't go to college. So I'm not really sure why this is the talk, why this is the big thing right now, when the people who are truly suffering are the ones who never even went to school, and they're not suffering from student loan debt. They're not underwater with student loan debt. Many of us have been underwater with this for, like I said, I've been underwater with it for 15 years. So I've lived with it for this long. It's not great. I still can't buy a house. There's a lot of things I can't do because of it, because I'm riddled in student loan debt, which is really the only debt I have, minus a little left on my car. And that's the way it's always been. I've never been a debt person, but I've always carried big student loan debts that have burdened me for a really long time. And I've done that, and I could carry on for a few more years if necessary. I don't think it's necessarily the thing that needs to be addressed today when we're in the middle of a pandemic that is crushing the lowest of the low in our society economically. I think they need the help more than anybody right now. And again, this is just sort of a matter of privileged, I think, people that are screaming about save me, lockdown, but you poor people go out there and deliver my Grubhub and work in the kitchens and package my food and work the farms while I shelter in place. And then when things start to open back up, those same people say, now forgive my student loan debt. It, to me, screams of privilege. I don't think now is the time. But I hope that when it is time, and when we have helped those who need the help the most, I hope that I have convinced many of you tonight that it is something we absolutely need to do, and we need to go actually beyond that if we want to have a good society, if we want to make America great again.